Hey, so Tom, we didn't ask you, and we're asking everybody who's come on the show today, as things start opening up a little bit, obviously up north has begun, and if everything goes well there, it's going to, continue. Where is your line? I mean, if that place is open up, are you jumping right out there? Or are you gonna wait for a little bit? Are you anxious to do it? Do you think it's already past due? What are your thoughts?
Um, I'm cautious, Uh, I've kind of put this whole pandemic thing in a historical perspective of, the Black Death and shit, I mean, this isn't a hoax. This shit is for real. And historically, we've been able to come together and beat it in the 60s. The Soviet Union, the US scientists teamed together to, when we need to be coming together, we're being divided. And it's very unfortunate in my view. I think that, I agree that the economic impact is a real thing too. And I want, places to reopen with the social distancing. I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive, a lot of businesses can't work remote. Luckily, in my business, we are able to. So I shouldn't be too judgmental because I'm lucky. But pandemics, until we have a good treatment, it could wipe out a lot of people. So I'm more on the stay at home, stay safe side of the spectrum. Just following my governor's advice. And I kind of look at it like, okay, the legislature came down with the game plan and the rules that we're all going to play, let's say a game of football. And Governor Whitmer is our quarterback. And the plan is a cogent public education plan on social distancing to try to stem the spread. And the people in their game are like tripping the quarterback. And I'm sitting over on the bench, wishing I was in the game. I'm pissed off. They're in the game. They're like tripping our own quarterback, these Republicans by undercutting her communication. I mean, the play has been called. We got to communicate social distancing and wearing a mask. And then these guys are going to get in the way of that. It's too late. They passed the law back in 1950. She's now the executive. She's implementing the law. I mean, I disagree.
Well, it was challenged, and the judge said that the challenge was meritless. So for clarity, the governor can do that under these circumstances, not for the flavored vapes. It turns out, which I agree with too. That wasn't the same kind of an emergency. This
is how we learn where the parameters of the government's authority is. We learned that sometimes she steps over the line, but sometimes she's acting within the line. And when it comes down to it, the legislature needs to be, a group of linemen, right? Yeah. As the analogy Tom's using, instead of bitching about the play that's being called and trying to run something different, you have to follow what the quarterback's called. And when she says hike, everybody's got to be moving in the same direction with the same idea and the same program in mind. And when they want to do their own thing, then it's just chaos. It's like the Detroit Lions actually playing football instead of being off this season.
Hey man, if we look back on it later,
freedom of speech, I'm all for challenging government. You know me.
No, we hope that it's wrong. We hope that it's not that bad. Really, we all want it to not be this big deadly pandemic that it is. And
I don't want
it turns out not to be as great. But let's not just assume that it's not at any point. We've seen what's happened around the world and in our own state now, and so let's
I've had clients die. I've had a client's mother die. I've had a good friend in the movement. She had that little 12-year-old girl and her mother who died. I mean, it's
Isaac Robinson, who's a state representative Isaac Robinson, who's been to Cannabis Counsel many times. He was a friend of ours, friend of the movement. Jolly guy, always a smile.
Yeah. Huge,
gentle, gigantic guy, but always happy and very, very understanding, very wise, and taken too young.
He was our best legislator.
Last week, I had my senator, Morris Hood. He was a Democratic floor leader. He passed away from COVID-19, and he was also a really good legislator on our issue, and he always introduced it and sponsored it too.
That's right. Hey, so Tom also participated in our digital hash bash, which was like a month and a half ago now, around there. And
how fun was that?
That was a lot of fun.
And we've been trying, and Rick made a lot of great, like, smaller segments of people's presentation, and we're gonna play that. We're gonna take a break. Mark and Toni, I hope you guys want to hang on. You're welcome to be here for this show, participate in the conversation, and we'll get back on some hemp stuff for sure.
Right on.
Yeah, please, and even if we're not talking about that, I know you guys have been around in the scene and part of the community in many respects for a long time. So any thoughts on anything we're talking about, feel free to contribute. But in a minute here, we'll play Tom's presentation from the Digital Hash Bash, and
I was trying to imagine I'm on the big stage with lots of people, So if I'm a little over the top with the dramatics, don't hold it against me.
Your speech was great, Tom. You'll watch it.
You were a star, man. You were amidst the best. You had your shit together, unlike
I followed Chuck Ream, Chuck Ream.
I know. I was like, I had to follow Chuck Ream and Tom. I was like, how do I do this?
That'll get your blood going. That'll get you up there.
That's right.
So anytime, Derek, if you want to toss that on, man. Not to be confused with tossing off.
Derek's got that slouch. I was wondering.
I saw some under the desk hand stuff, so I wasn't sure.
All right, so everybody will mute our microphones and watch the show.
There you go.
Mute, Gauci, mute.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. I'm excited to introduce our next guest. He, of course, is attorney, brother, and one of the partners at Cannabis Counsel, which is one of Michigan's premier cannabis law firms providing legal services to cannabis businesses throughout the state. As I said, he's been in practice for over 30 years, and with his esteemed colleague, Matt Abel, both Tom Lavigne and Matt have been leaders in both the law and in the advocacy for reforming the laws regarding marijuana. And it's my great pleasure to introduce brother counsel, Mr. Thomas Lavigne.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be here. Digital Hash Bash. In these amazingly earth-shifting times, I think we can all learn from the challenges we faced, the huge obstacles we overcame to legalize this natural resource, this Mother Earth healing plant. Now we face this pandemic, and we can draw from that strength, from that togetherness, from that brotherhood and sisterhood that we have. One of my favorite songwriters, singer-songwriters, Bill Withers, just passed away. The writer of Lean on Me. You can all lean on me in these times. We've said that before. We've accomplished great things. We're moving forward. We will accomplish great things, even coming out of this pandemic situation. Now, the crisis has really brought to light the defective healthcare system that's been handed to us. And I believe that huge leaps of progress can happen because we're facing such a perilous challenge. We have to brainstorm. We have to come together. We have to put down our days of pragmatism, where what works, where the compromise is the truth, and pick up our dialectical materialism, the scientific method. Let's look at the facts. Let's do and plan forward. For many years, I was involved in consulting using Japanese management techniques, trees, Russian innovation techniques. And one thing that we would do in product development context is you would look into the future. And by looking into the future, you can plan for these. One study we would do is failure modes and effects analysis. You get a bunch of smart people in the room. You consider all these potential failure modes and rank them in terms of, what could be the most devastating. Wouldn't you think a pandemic? But that's central planning. That's not the way that we operate. And I think it needs to be more so, is my point. And using a scientific dialectical materialist approach as opposed to the modern, postmodernism of, that's just your opinion. No, let's get to the facts. Let's apply science and continue to solve problems. Cannabis has remarkable properties. We could have been healing a lot of people over the last 100 years without exposing them to the drastic side effects that Big Pharma has handed us and has devastated our people. How many people has that killed? The opioid crisis. Whereas cannabis is an alternative to that, and yet cannabis was not recommended? How dare we, as a medical system, allow that to happen? It's mass malpractice. And for us to disregard herbal medicine as an approach altogether, herbal medicine. It's all part of the same thing, as opposed to these freakish chemicals they throw at us. And so in moving forward and the importance of healthcare and the treatment of our people in mass and the availability of medicines that heal, not medicines that kill. We demand medicines that heal. We reject your medicines that kill. And amidst this mass pandemic, this global crisis, I pray that we put down the politics, we put down the absurdity of pragmatism, where only what works is what's truth. Oh, we have to compromise the truth a little bit because this bullshitter over here, I might need to make a deal with him in the future. We're done with that shit. We need to sit down with the smartest people in the room, apply science, solve problems, and move the ball forward. Let's get her done, people. We face this peril, but I see a brighter day, and let's demand greatness of this country. And let's reject the mediocrity that was behind prohibition in the first place. I remember the slaughter of Rainbow Farms, Roland Rome and Tom Crossland, Brandon Peoples. There's been some real suffering, death. I'm reminded of Jerry Duvall in federal prison still today. It's unacceptable. It's a cage of pandemic hotspot. It's exactly the opposite of physical distancing, and they're forcing it upon them. So let's move this ball forward, everybody, and demand greatness and lead as we know how to lead, people. I love you all. Hash Bash 2020.
Good job, man.
That was fun.
Tom, you got to be proud of that. That's a moving speech. We reject your medicines that kill. I don't know if you could see me, but I've watched it so many times. I knew exactly when you were going to say that, and I was saying it with you like you're a rock star, and I'm repeating your lyric, man.
Yeah. Yep, you were getting into it, which is always cool, man. That was great. And you were all set up too. There was no like, hey, unmute that, or you have to hit that button so that the video comes on type of stuff. You were all set up, ready to go. That was perfect. So I agree with you, man. Science just, or the logical approach just isn't like utilized in lawmaking. That's not what is the concern. If we've seen, that's why Michigan ranks amidst the most corrupt governments. It depends on who's getting to somebody, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunate. We saw everybody jump on board with that stupid pregnancy label. That wasn't something similar. I asked some people who I really like and respect, why did you vote yes for that? And I was told, well, it's just like on on an aspirin bottle or something like that. And it's not. That thing
It's
really
a warning label they've asked to put on medical and recreational marijuana packages that warn potentially pregnant females about the dangers of cannabis use, Jim.
Yeah, man, but it gets like it's written in a particular way that is over the board. That's really
just
kind of
3 weeks ago, a big medical study reviewed all of the studies looking into the effect on pregnancy, and they found no correlation. If anything, something positive.
Mm-hmm.
The Jamaican study is the most famous, the longitudinal one where they follow them for like decades after birth. And
I know
excellent study.
I know plenty of women who have have smoked during pregnancy to, ail certain, just stomach aches and everything.
Yeah,
Cramps,
there's lots of
nausea, for
things.
sure, yes.
And that was one of my concerns. The warning could potentially scare some people off from something that's working for them. Which is it's to say something similar like, hey, consult your physician, which is on an aspirin bottle or Advil bottle or something like that. Fine, but this thing goes out of its way to describe, potentially horrible consequences if you do this or that. It's overboard.
Who would do that?
Yeah. So, Mark, Toni, what do you want to say?
Mark said, who would do that?
The legislature. That's who would do that, right? People that really never wanted cannabis to be where it's at right now. They were reluctantly dragged to this place kicking and screaming. And this is the way a child with his tantrum, tries to continue to lash out even after he's been sent to his room. So we've seen the legislature, several things, THC in driving, this infatuation they have with labels and requirements, our over-the-top testing protocol here in the state. Lots of ways that we still have work to do. Nobody quits. Everybody fights. Lots of cannabis law reform left for Michigan's future.
Yeah, I think that parents are responsible for their kids and they're capable of finding natural solutions for them. I don't think that they should be scared of this research and experimenting with this medicine on their kids, because it does work for them. It works for animals.
When we have Amish communities that completely reject modern medicine and we allow them to do that, it's their right because of their religion. Why would we not extend that same right to the regular citizenry, the non-Amish people? We are all, under the same banner,
Hey,
right?
Speaking of that, Tom, aren't we supposed to have that right under the First Amendment? Shouldn't that just be automatic?
Yes, we are. It's a First Amendment right, this right to religious use itself. And I took a case, Brandon Barnes, U.S. versus Brandon Barnes, up to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit after the Hobby Lobby case. So as you'll recall, the U.S. Supreme Court had ruled in Hobby Lobby that a bunch of fat cat churchgoers can deny health care to women based on their religious beliefs that against abortion. So the U.S. Supreme Court said, yeah, because the religious, what's the act? The Republicans had passed an act federally which kind of went backwards a couple decades in terms of where the case law was going. They wanted it back the old way. And then Hobby Lobby kind of firmed that up. But when we went to apply that more, giving deference to religious rights, to marijuana, the Court of Appeals wasn't willing to go that way. They screw us, but they let the Hobby Lobby do whatever the fuck they want to do. Unbelievable. Just made no logical sense, this opinion. Unfortunately, the client, didn't want to take it up to the U.S. Supreme Court. I don't even know if they would have taken it.
So this now it makes me want to divert just for a second and get your thoughts on what's going on with the frackers and the 180-day rule and the potential rulings in that regard, or the existing ruling and the potential rulings in that regard.
And just to explain to our listeners, there's a requirement in Michigan, 180 days. You have 6 months to collect petition signatures, and that's it. Even though that's not necessarily the way that we read the law. So this anti-fracking group has challenged that regulation.
Yeah, and that law was made during the Snyder administration after both the MI-Legalized group and the fracking group began collecting signatures.
Yep.
It was assumed by policy that was the limit. Well, Tom, if you want to explain any of that, feel free, but I'm going to take too much time on it.
I mean, they pass a law after the fact, and they wanted to apply to us two groups, and they did. And the thing is, this Frank Kelly, who was our Attorney General for decades, a real rock star, legal scholar, honest, straight shooter, he deemed this 180-day idea unconstitutional. He pointed out that the whole idea with petition gathering is if you have a legislature that's captive to big money, then somebody without big money can go and collect signatures and change the law. Well, if you got to do it in 180 days, you got to have big money. So this makes no sense. This 180 days went totally contrary to the whole public policy between that. That was the reason for ballot initiatives, to let the small guy get something done legislatively without, now it's reserved to the DeVosses, and then they're, is that really the intention, that big money should be the only ones able to get shit on the ballot? It just doesn't make sense. That 180 days, to require it to all the signatures to be collected within that 180 days is not what's required. It's and even if it were, it like Frank Kelly said, it's contrary to the public policy. It's not.
That new law is was just a new statute. It didn't change the state constitution, and that's where the argument is of having up to 4 years to collect signatures between gubernatorial elections, it says, which is a 4-year period.
The fact is true that we've had recent years where there was 4, 5, 6 different statewide petitions appearing on the ballot. That's a very active form of democracy. And this 180-day rule does put a crimp on that ability for us to directly affect lawmaking in our lane.
And I hope that fixing the gerrymandering issue also helps to fix the need for having to have like 10 different initiatives on the ballot every time.
Too bad the courts reversed that. Initially, it was going to apply to this election or something.
Right.
But now we got to wait till the next cycle.
Yeah.
That was bullshit, but at least
I think so too.
Well, again, the system resists change. It doesn't give power up willingly. And this is another example of how, we are trying to take back power as the citizenry. And those who have power are just not going to make it easy for us. They'll challenge us legally every step of the way.
Hey, Tom, was that based on the U.S. Supreme Court just saying that that they are not going to intervene in the state's choices on how to plan districts or something like that? Or what was that rejection of fixing it this year based on?
Oh, yeah. I don't know that
they couldn't convene the people in time. Right? They couldn't get it together in time for this election. Was that it?
Yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't apply.
It's a separate case. It wasn't necessarily directly connected to the new ballot initiative that just passed. It was based on how it was illegally formed in the first place, and that it should immediately be. And one judge did say this should immediately be taken down and redone. And
Yeah, really, it shouldn't have required a statutory amendment, because how is that an expression of democracy to allow this gerrymandering bullshit? That, I mean, just make it in a logical way, not an unfair playing field. I mean, it goes down to fundamental fairness of any contest of two teams. It was made fundamentally unfair.
Again, you might not agree with a popular decision, but if many people are weighing in on it, then it's easier to take instead of just a small group of people figuring out a way to kind of control.
But it's a tool of government, though. If you look at the city of Flint, the way that the school districts are so stretched out and twisted, it's all to try and achieve a racial harmony. They change districts in order to aggregate a certain number of people and try and it's just nonsense. The games that they play with statistics and demographic data, it's all got some subtleties to it. So as far as I'm concerned, make off great big squares, make sure that they're approximately equal, and that's what you do, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
So yeah, that had a constant. I always thought the courts should do it, we shouldn't have to wait for a ballot initiative. Any honest judge should have ruled that it was unconstitutional a long time ago. Then we started seeing it here and there around the country. A couple courts did rule on it.
And I wish the U.S. Supreme Court would have taken up we had a legitimate constitutional question. We had barriers to the procedures that we couldn't overcome. And then with people don't know, they was set up. We were in part blocked by this policy of the Board of Canvassers themselves on how you can revive the signatures that were more than 180 days old.
Mm-hmm.
And that's by demonstrating that the person was registered to vote at the time of signing and then at the current time. And you had to do that with each individual clerk of the 1,700 municipalities, villages, and townships. But then there was this electronic database that came into play in the late 90s via internet and stuff like that, and that took that place so that you didn't have to do all that stuff. But we were still told that we had to do all that in order, which you can't do, which is impossible. Clerk. That means like a petition sheet which is original from whatever county it was written from, it's got to go to each municipality by whoever signed it in that county. So it's prohibitive.
It's a standard that couldn't be met, which is essentially why they said it. The legislature makes rules. That's their job. They don't like it when the people make rules outside of them. The legislators really don't like the cannabis laws because we did them on our own, both the legalization and the medical. So they try to make it difficult, and this is one of the ways. And that whole board, remember the running Republican? Remember we had the canvassing board. And Tom knows what I'm talking about. And it's a 4-person board, which is so strange. You normally want to have an odd number, but in this case, it's a 4-person board. So it normally 2 Dems, 2 Republicans, and one.
Well, there's one director who's a deciding vote. Yeah.
In one meeting, one of the Republicans was absent, so it was 2 Democrats and 1 Republican. Realizing he could be easily outvoted on all of the things in front of the panel that day, the 1 Republican suddenly found out he had an emergency, and he got up and ran straight out of the room.
He ran out of there.
To bring the entire proceeding to a halt, so nothing could get done because there wasn't parity.
And that would have changed that policy in question and would have made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Absolutely. What a jerk that guy is. I call him the running Republican in my analysis of that.
And then after we would have had to have gone to every clerk when we would have brought it to the Board of Elections for confirmation, they wouldn't have gone to every clerk. They would have used the database that we proposed using in the first place, because that's the way that it's done.
Yep. And it was done properly through the electronic database, assuming that since it came in after, that it takes the place of all that. But that didn't wash with that group. They wanted to stick to the details in order to be prohibitive.
Oftentimes people look at the result we got with the legalization proposal and they forget all the tribulations we had on our way there. Jim, you wanted to comment?
No, I have a question. Can you guys remember there's maybe 2 other groups that also wanted to legalize cannabis for the state back then? And remind me, will you?
Repeal today, of course, was 2012.
Yeah, but he's talking about the Michigan Responsibility Council, MRC, or something like that.
Yep, I think that's it.
And then the
guys from Ohio.
And then the oligopoly one that Tim was supporting. Tim didn't support it because he likes that model necessarily, but he thought they got the money. They will at least achieve some type of legalization. So
Yeah,
he
they
jumped in on
wanted
that
10
one. But we
10
could do better.
companies
That's, you know, that was an ongoing issue, an argument, even when the national groups came into Michigan. We can do better sooner. So we're not just going to settle for some shit like that, man. So
During the
I was also
petition signature
thinking there
collection
was-
time, Colin will tell you, there were several petitions out there from different competing groups, and it was sometimes difficult to make sure that we were getting our petition signed. Isn't that right, Colin?
Yeah, I was gonna say abrogate was another one.
oh yeah, yeah.
I totally forgot.
Yeah.
Who wanted
People
complete
would-
prohibition, and they wanted a
Yeah, we all want that, but it's just they wanted to change the Constitution, and they wanted to take it to that extreme right away. So a couple of knocks
We had
without any
tried in
resources.
2012.
So
That
a
was our
couple-
repeal
yeah.
today 2012 motion was a single one sentence constitutional change.
We learned a little bit, I think, from that
Yeah,
process, though. You know,
but I think we educated the public a lot.
yeah, it was great. Yeah,
Let's go work.
yeah, collected 50,000-60,000 signatures all through, or something like that, all through volunteers. Talked about it a lot. Got a lot of media stuff. Remember one time, Tom, you and I were on somebody's show on WEMU. I forgot what Lynn Rivers show or something like that. I forgot, but anyway,
Yep,
we're talking about it then. That was repeal today stuff.
Yeah.
Tom had a great backpack, which had a big extension that came out from the top with a sign above his head that said repeal today, sign here. And he would walk through crowds of people at Eastern Market and other places. And Andrea, his lovely wife, would be there with the petitioning board, and he would be the barker to bring them in, and she would wrangle the signatures. It was quite memorable.
Yeah.
Shoot some clones for me, some CBD clones.
I have a bunch of plants.
You have some plants? How much?
Tony, it looks like Tony's having technical difficulties. We're sorry about that, Tony and Mark. Hang on as long as you can, but if you have to ditch, we totally understand. So.
Yeah, you can go out and come back in if you need to. Whatever you need to do, try to hang in as much as you can.
Yeah. Yep.
Look like you're pretty good right now, though.
So, Tom, how's Cannabis Counsel been weathering this whole COVID crisis? I know you said you're working remotely, but are you seeing a decrease in the number of cannabis cases being presented for prosecution, or are you seeing an acceleration, or what?
Well, we do mostly business stuff, except Sean with the office. There is still a little bit of, on the driving cases.
Okay.
Then there's some issues with dispensaries breaking the rules a little bit. So we have hearings on those sorts of compliance things. And, but fortunately, MRA has been open, and we've been able to correspond and continue to file applications. And some localities have been better than others to deal with local governments. We deal a lot with the municipalities. But we were able to have some Zoom.
Hey, you know what? Just for a second, Tom, sorry, but Toni and Mark are going to head out. They're having a hard time keeping a stable connection.
All right.
They're going to
Good to
melt
see
if
you.
they don't get off very quickly. But
We are having difficulty,
Good to
technical
see you both.
difficulty.
Hey, but it was great to hear about last year and this year's hemp garden coming up, and that's just beginning. I mean, it's just getting started here. This whole thing has got so much potential.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see your next
Thanks.
the
Oh.
cultivation this year. It's going to be awesome. Can't wait to see it.
See you guys.
Maybe we
Yeah,
can
we'll
do it
definitely
again.
have you out.
Oh yeah,
Bye.
We'd like to come see it again. We'll have you guys back on to report too. Thank you guys very much.
That was really an awesome segment
Yeah.
with Toni and Marc. Really pioneers. This whole first year of hemp in Michigan has been a learning experience for everyone, and they're right there with everyone else.
They've been trying to do things since early on and working with these other these other tribes and other states and stuff like that. The one or who already got it going in some regards and want to get whatever it is. They all try to get information and get things up and running early on. Put together some of the early seminars on it, and been involved with like Michael's group, as they were saying, and stuff like that. So yeah, they've been in on it early and often. So that's really cool to hear from them.
We did the Michigan Hemp Conference. So I think was the first hemp conference in the state, or one of the first hemp conferences in the state. And I know that Mark and Toni were there. And when it comes to something like this, you have to get out. You have to seek the information. You can't expect it to flow naturally to you. And if you don't do the homework and if you don't do the research, then you will be the worse for it. And talk about some people that did their research and made smart connections. Really, you'd like to see good people succeed. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I remember going to a meeting in Ann Arbor, and they had Gus Rosagna there and some other people, and they really were doing their research and making the right connections and getting themselves set up. And here they are, season 2. So we'll check in on them later and see how it goes, and hopefully be able to make it up there and see what they've done.
That'd make a good TV series. Hemp Farm, the reality.
Hey man, Tom, I don't know what's going on with Tom, but his description of what was going on in Hawaii sounded like a movie to me. At least a good made-for-TV movie.
And a much more friendly place to film. No
Sure.
snow. So
unless you seek it, there's mountains there you can go skiing if you want.
There than it is Detroit.
yeah, Hawaii is a lot more expensive than it is Detroit, but I mean, Hawaii.
Yeah,
Hawaii is fucking awesome, man. I've had the fortune of being there a couple of times. I would like to go back.
Never been.
I recommend it.
Yeah,
You
we're doing great.
Yeah, it'd be cool if Tom came back in. I didn't mean to scare him off. I just wanted to make sure we recognized our guests before they had to leave. He might be there. He is. He's sliding back in. Tom took advantage of the opportunity and sifted off for a second or two, but he's back. So
Good to see you.
Tom, we've got a lawsuit currently going on. The Cannabis Counsel and Comorran Law is involved with as far as suing the state of Michigan to remove cannabis from the schedule of controlled substances. John St. Clair is a plaintiff in that. Michigan Normal's attached to that as well. What's our current
MMA,
status
Josie
of that?
Scoggin.
Yeah, that's true. Yep, a lot of friends of ours. What's the
Yes.
status?
Yes. Well, it's kind of stalled right now with COVID. I think we faced a summary disposition, and I think, let me see. It's kind of stalled right now.
Court of claims or
I think
appeals.
that it is untenable.
So is there a way to then just redo it, repackage it, and even add in the new stuff with the MRTMA, which makes it even a stronger case? I mean, that particular case that we're talking about is just based on the MMFLA, isn't it? Wasn't that before the legalization even was official in Michigan?
And the MMMA,
Right.
just even the section 2B of the MMMA, the finding that this has medical efficacy, and that and then you have 7E, the superiority clause.
Yeah, and isn't that stupid?
Trumps the fucking thing in the first place. We could even
Trumps all laws.
Isn't the Schedule 2 thing really stupid? It says Schedule 2, if being used medically, which was just followed Schedule 1, which says it has no medicinal value at all.
I know.
If you're going to put it in Schedule 2, that nullifies Schedule 1 on its face. I mean,
right. Because it, by definition, would have to have no medical.
Right. I mean, it's really fucking stupid, the lengths that we go to in this state to stop, just
So
moving forward sensibly with cannabis.
Well, and Tom, they want to treat drugs differently. They want to treat precursor pieces versus completed pieces separately. So, you have cannabis plants, which they want to treat as Schedule 1, but cannabis flower used medicinally, which they want to treat as Schedule 2. They do the same thing with other origin species in other drug laws, don't they?
Yes. Yeah. With like opium and that sort of thing, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just thought, man, repeal today. Remember, we're closing in kind of on toward the end of the show, but you remember the announcement to lift off that campaign took place in Detroit at the
Park Davis building.
At the Park Davis building that used to process cannabis for medicine.
How cool was that?
Yeah, that was really cool.
I think Jim mentioned that the other day. Actually, Jim had that. Yes.
Yep, and
What a
that's
great
right.
thing.
That's where I met Joe White originally.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good old Robert's Hotel.
Yeah.
Now.
And that was 2012, if I'm not mistaken. I know 2012 was when we collected signatures for that ballot, but I don't know if we announced it in 2011 or whether it was 2012.
Oh yeah.
I think it was 2012, right before the signature gathering started.
Yes, that makes sense. Yep. Yeah.
Of course,
Bob
our old,
Alexander. Remember Bob Alexander coming to those big
I do.
100 people rallies, and he'd get us all organized, man. He was
Chuck Ream said about that guy. He said that guy's worth 1,000 people.
Yeah, he
You
was
know?
amazing.
Yeah,
And he's unfortunately, I believe he's
He has
passed
passed.
away at this
He
point.
has.
Yeah.
But he was in on the beginning of starting the progressive group or caucus maybe, or I'm not sure the official thing, but he was involved in starting the progressive movement officially in Michigan.
Yeah.
And
There
he
are a lot
trained
of
people really well on collecting signatures. Go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
there are a lot of people that have their efforts have been unheralded. Bob Alexander used to make us call him different names, and we couldn't use his actual name itself
Yeah,
because he was
Chuckles.
worried. What's that, Tom?
Chuckles.
Yeah, Chuckles was
His wife is employed by the state, and he thought there might be a harm to that job.
So-
There's connection to this stuff.
And
Which there were,
Henry
man.
was-
You know what? There were people like Gersh in the old days was arrested just for collecting signatures.
I know.
You know, many years. So it's risky.
The
just to
shit we
be-
went through.
You know?
The people nowadays, they walk into the industry, they think they got to throw some money at MRA and they got to do this, and that's how cannabis is. No, motherfucker, no. It was tough. They shot your dogs. They robbed you. They pulled you over. They harassed you. They hung out at dispensaries and followed patients as they left. They surveilled. They would park a car there just to screw with your enterprise, man. There are so many ways that we were victimized in the industry. And then as a consumer, come on. I mean, and African Americans, come on. The way that they treated African Americans for decades and continue to still do.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that too, Tom. When we brought it up before, there was an article in the Metro Times just recently saying that some of the same tactics using cannabis are still being used on
Still happening
disproportionately
today.
on minorities. Right?
Yes, still today, there's disproportionate enforcement of the DUI laws that we're still stuck with, you know, still happening. So we have to deschedule this.
So so maybe a return of this suit just in a different form with some new information? Does that make any difference?
I think so.
Well, good. I mean, we do what we need to do.
Is that be more successful after the election of 2020 to see if we get a more favorable situation in the way that the courts are arranged?
Potentially.
Yeah.
Also, it's being looked at legislatively too, and it makes sense. I mean, we've acknowledged that there's a lack of logic, but it's pretty straightforward. We don't treat it like a Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 drug in the state, and it's inappropriate for it to be there. And in other states, they automatically fix those inconsistencies as part of their processes. We don't do that here, so we have that conflict.
But we have a Republican-controlled House and Senate here in the state of Michigan. So when they fix something, it's typically not a complete job, nor is it the type of fix that we, the people, would elect them to do.
Exactly.
Hey, Tom, anything you want to make sure that you get across? We're going to start winding down the last few minutes.
Okay.
So please.
The new social equity thing was kind of interesting now. A change there. Added a bunch of more communities.
From the Marijuana Regulatory Agency for Michigan's program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There still needs to be a push to get localities and their policies when they choose to adopt them to kind of expand on that a little bit. I mean, like, as they did in Ypsilanti. They should definitely do that in Detroit. I mean,
it's still a huge hurdle, you know, these local ordinances. I don't trust Detroit's going to get it done right.
What's the latest on Detroit, Tom?
Matt's working on a draft of the ballot. We got to get it done before July. We need your help.
Yeah, there's nothing sensible, and this will even be challenged and hard to implement. But there's nothing sensible that's going to come out of the council themselves. I mean, there's been years of this now. It's just ridiculous. There's no reason to believe they're going to get their shit together.
Who was in the planning department there? Now he's running for the House of Representatives. He's always been pretty reasonable as a city worker in the planning department. He said he saw the draft. Nobody's seen the draft, but he saw the draft. No micro businesses, no consumption lounges.